She texted me, "I'm going offline. Talk tomorrow. Love you." 15 minutes later, she was on Instagram, posting a story with someone else. Same night, same time. I watched it 3 times, just to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding it. Then I took a screenshot, sent it to her, and blocked her everywhere before she could reply. Because at that moment, I finally understood everything. She texted me that night, "I'm going offline for the night. Tired. Talk tomorrow, okay? Love you." That was the text. 9 words that I read, smiled at, and then set my phone face down on my nightstand like a man who had no reason in the world to feel anything other than completely at peace. I even felt a little soft about it, because she had added "love you" at the end, and she didn't always do that, not in a casual goodnight text. So I remember lying back on my pillow, staring at the ceiling fan, feeling this quiet kind of warmth. The kind of warmth that makes you think everything is fine. The kind that makes you feel stupid later. I'm 26. She was 24. We'd been together for almost 2 years, living in separate apartments about 20 minutes apart in the same city. That's all the background you need right now. I don't know exactly what made me open Instagram. I wasn't suspicious. I wasn't looking for anything. I think it was just that my brain was still buzzing from a long day at work, and I wasn't ready to sleep yet. So I picked up my phone out of pure habit and started scrolling. Instagram stories first. That's where you go when you're mindlessly killing 10 minutes before your eyes get heavy. The little circles along the top of the screen. Colleagues, friends, some content creator I followed because he made funny videos about remote work. And then her circle appeared. Her profile picture in that little ring. A ring that should have been gray, the color it turns when someone hasn't posted, because she had told me, less than 20 minutes ago, that she was going offline. But the circle wasn't gray. It had a bright pink-orange gradient around it. A fresh story, posted 4 minutes ago. I genuinely thought I had misread the notification. I stared at it for a second the way you stare at a word that suddenly looks like it's spelled wrong even though it never was before. Then I tapped on it. Her story loaded. It was a video, not a selfie, not a flat lay, not a quote slide, a video. The kind you take when you're somewhere with ambient noise and you want to capture the vibe. There was music playing in the background, something upbeat and warm, and the camera was pointed at a table that had 2 cocktail glasses on it, a flickering candle, and some plates with food. Someone's hand was reaching in from the left side of the frame, and that hand was holding up a glass like a toast. The caption on the story said, "Nights like these clinking glasses sparkles." I watched it again, and one more time after that. There are moments in life where your brain refuses to process what your eyes are already showing it. This was one of those moments. Because the most logical explanation, the one my brain kept trying to offer me like a nervous waiter, was that this was an old story. That maybe she had posted this before she texted me. That the timestamps were just slightly off because of some app lag or time zone weirdness. I wanted to believe that so badly that I almost convinced myself. Almost. But the story was posted at 11:17 p.m. And her, "I'm going offline," text came in at 11:02 p.m. 15 minutes. She texted me that she was going offline. And then 15 minutes later, she posted an Instagram story from what was very clearly a restaurant or a bar. With cocktails. With someone else's hand in the frame. At 11:17 at night. I put my phone down on the bed and just sat there. My room was quiet except for the ceiling fan and the distant sound of a car passing outside. I wasn't angry yet. Anger would come later. Right now, it was something colder. Something slower. It felt like being submerged. Like the water wasn't crashing over you. It was just rising, inch by inch, and you were watching it happen without being able to move. I picked my phone back up. I went to her text. I read it again. "I'm going offline for the night. Tired. Talk tomorrow, okay? Love you." Then I opened her story again. Those 2 cocktail glasses, that candle, that hand doing a little toast. Nights like these clinking glasses sparkles. I took a screenshot of the story. I went back to our text thread. I typed nothing. I just sent the screenshot. No caption. No "what is this?" No question mark. Just the image. And then I watched the little double tick turn blue, which meant she saw it immediately. Which meant her phone was very much in her hand. Which meant she was very much not asleep. The typing indicator appeared. 3 little dots, bouncing. I watched them. And then they disappeared. No message came through. The dots appeared again. Then disappeared again. Then a third time. Dots, pause, nothing. She was typing and deleting. Typing and deleting. Which is the behavior of someone who is not confused by what they were sent. Confused people type fast. They send "wait what" or "huh." in about 4 seconds. They don't sit there drafting and erasing responses for 2 minutes. Guilty people draft and erase. Guilty people weigh every word. Guilty people try to find the version of the truth that damages them the least. If you enjoy real stories like this, subscribe, because what happened next completely changed everything. I blocked her on iMessage, then on Instagram, then on WhatsApp, then on Snapchat, even though we barely used it. Then I found her number and blocked it from my phone entirely. I did it all in maybe 45 seconds. Not in a rage, not crying, not shaking. I did it quietly, methodically, the way you clear out a workspace at the end of a job. Not because I was done processing, but because I didn't trust myself to read whatever she was about to send. Because whatever she was going to say in those carefully drafted and deleted messages was going to be a performance. And I wasn't in the mood for theater that night. I want to back up now. Because the story doesn't start at 11:17 p.m. The real story starts about 6 months before that night. It starts with a guy named Cole. Cole was someone she had known from before we got together. They had met at some graphic design workshop. She works as a freelance brand designer, and apparently he was in the same industry, or adjacent to it. She mentioned him to me casually once, early in our relationship, the way you mention a professional acquaintance. Oh, Cole? Yeah, we met at this workshop thing. He's nice. He does motion graphics. That was it. That was the extent of the Cole briefing. I didn't think about it again for almost a year. Then, about 8 months into the relationship, she started a new project, a branding overhaul for a small lifestyle company. She was excited about it. She talked about it at dinner, showed me color palettes on her laptop, asked me what I thought about certain logo directions. I liked seeing her excited. Design was her thing the way writing code was mine. It was where she came alive, where she became completely unself-conscious, where the version of her that was always slightly guarded in social situations just dropped. I loved that version of her. So I paid attention when she talked about this project. I asked questions, I remembered the client's name, I asked for updates. And somewhere along the way, I noticed that Cole's name kept appearing in the updates. Cole thinks the serif font is more on brand. I showed Cole the revised color story, and he said it reads better now. Cole and I had a call this morning to go over the pitch deck. Cole. I didn't say anything for a while, partly because I didn't want to be that guy. You know the type, the insecure boyfriend who turns every male name his girlfriend mentions into a 5-act drama. I had been that guy in a previous relationship, back when I was 21 and operating entirely on anxiety and unprocessed jealousy, and it had been exhausting and ugly and ultimately groundless. I had told myself I was past it. I had told myself I was a grown adult who could trust the person he loved. So I let the Cole mentions accumulate without comment. I smiled and nodded and asked intelligent follow-up questions about the project itself. But then came the day I came over to her apartment, and she was on a video call. She held up one finger at me, the give me a minute gesture, and kept talking. I sat down on her couch and waited, and I could see her screen from where I was sitting. Not clearly, not enough to make out details, but clearly enough to see that the person on the other end of the call was a guy. Youngish, decent-looking, wearing a black t-shirt. They were laughing about something. Not a long conversation, just the tail end of one. She wrapped it up in about 3 minutes, said, "Okay, yeah, let's do that. I'll send it over tonight," and then ended the call. She turned to me, completely relaxed. "Sorry, that was Cole. We're doing a collab section for the pitch." "All good," I said, and I meant it mostly, but something, some small, quiet thing in my chest, had shifted. I want to be clear about something. There was nothing objectively wrong with any of what I had seen. She wasn't whispering. She wasn't hiding her screen. She told me his name immediately, without me asking. She was professional and direct on the call. Nothing about her body language when I walked in suggested someone caught in the middle of something she shouldn't be doing. And yet, there was this thing I can only describe as a frequency, a vibration between them, even through a screen. The ease, the laughter, the warmth that didn't feel entirely professional. Maybe I was imagining it, but I didn't think I was. I brought it up that evening, casually, carefully, the way you test ice before you walk on it. We were eating takeout on her couch, and I said something like, "So Cole, are you two pretty close?" She shrugged. "Professionally close, yeah. He's a good collaborator." "What? Just curious. You mentioned him a lot." She looked at me, not defensively, more like she was measuring the question, trying to figure out how serious I was being. "Is that a problem?" she asked. "Not a problem," I said. "Just a question." She reached over and squeezed my hand. "He's a colleague. That's it. and I let it go. Because that's the move you make when you don't have a single actual piece of evidence. You let it go, and you file it, and you wait. For the next few months, things were actually good. The Cole project wrapped up. His name appeared less frequently. We had a genuinely strong stretch. We took a weekend trip. We started cooking together on Sundays. We talked more openly than we ever had about where things were going and what we both wanted. She mentioned moving in together at some point. I said I was open to it. We talked about whether we wanted to stay in the city long-term or eventually move somewhere quieter. We were having the kind of conversations that feel like planning. And in those conversations, I felt like the Cole thing had been nothing. A blip. A chapter in the story of my own insecurity that I had fortunately managed not to turn into a fight. Then, about 2 months before the night of the Instagram story, she started a new project. Different client, different scope. But Cole was involved again. The client specifically requested him for the motion work, she explained, before I had even asked. Which was a strange thing to volunteer before a question. I noticed she started guarding her phone more. Not dramatically. Not slapping it face down the second I walked in the room. Just slightly more conscious of it. If her phone lit up on the table and I was nearby, she'd glance at it, and then glance at me before picking it up. Small thing. Could mean nothing. I've analyzed it so many times since then, and I still genuinely don't know if it was guilt or just habit. But I noticed it. I also noticed that our evening calls started getting shorter. We had a ritual. Every night before bed, we'd have a phone call. Not always long, sometimes just 20 minutes, but it was consistent. It had been consistent for almost the entire relationship. Somewhere around this second project, they started cutting off more abruptly. I'm really tired tonight. Can we talk tomorrow instead? I've got an early morning. I should probably crash. I've been staring at screens all day. I just need to decompress. All reasonable. All completely understandable for someone who worked the hours she worked. But when something changes in a pattern, when a rhythm that has been steady for 18 months suddenly starts skipping, it sits in your mind. It doesn't scream at you. It just sits there, quietly taking up space. The week before the night in question, there was one specific moment that, in retrospect, was the loudest signal I ignored. We were texting, mid-afternoon, and she mentioned she was having a working lunch with a client. Normal. She sent me a photo of her food, a salad with an avocado toast. And I sent back a heart and made some joke about how salads at fancy places were just decoration for bread. She laughed, or typed haha, which I chose to read as laughing. That evening, I was on her Instagram page, not snooping, just scrolling, and I saw that she had posted a story from that afternoon. It was a photo of the same table I had seen in the food picture she sent me, but the shot was wider. And across the table, just barely in frame, was a second plate. And an arm. A man's arm. She hadn't mentioned she was having lunch with a person. She had just said, working lunch with a client. Maybe the arm belonged to the client. Maybe. But when I texted her that night, something made me not mention it. I don't know why. Maybe because I didn't want to hear the explanation. Maybe because I already suspected the explanation wouldn't fully satisfy me, and I wasn't ready to be standing at that edge yet. So we arrive at the night. The 11:02 p.m. text. The 11:17 p.m. story. I've already told you what I saw, but here's what I did after I blocked her on everything. I lay in the dark and I did something I had been refusing to do for months. I went back through my memory, not Instagram, not texts, not any digital record, just memory. Every time her story had been slightly off. Every time a name had appeared too often. Every time she'd adjusted the angle of her phone screen. Every shortened phone call. Every vague explanation. Every moment I had taken the charitable interpretation and filed the other one away. I had been building a case file in the back of my mind without realizing it. And lying in the dark that night, for the first time, I actually opened it and read it. And what I found wasn't anger. What I found was a feeling that was harder to name. Something like recognizing your own handwriting in a letter you don't remember writing. Because the truth was, I had known. Not the specific details. Not the cocktail glasses and the candle and the hand doing a toast. But the shape of it. The outline. I had known for months that something wasn't completely right, and I had chosen comfort over clarity. I had chosen the version of events that allowed things to stay the same, because staying the same felt easier than pulling on the thread and watching the whole thing unravel. And so in some way, not in the way that excuses her, but in the way that is just honest, I had done this to myself. I had stood at the edge of the truth multiple times and stepped back, until the night she handed me proof I couldn't file away. By morning, My phone had approximately 47 attempts at contact from numbers and accounts I hadn't thought to block. Her sister had texted. A mutual friend of ours, a guy named Oliver, had sent a long message that started with, "Hey man, I know you're upset, but..." She had emailed me through an old address she apparently still had from when we shared a document 2 years ago. The email subject line was, "Please just let me explain." I read the subject line. I did not open the email. I went to work. I sat at my desk. I wrote code for 6 hours. There is something quietly useful about work when everything else is in chaos. Not because it heals anything, but because it asks nothing of you emotionally and gives you something to do with your hands. At lunch, I sat alone in the break room and let myself think for the first time since I'd blocked everything. What did I actually believe had happened? The story possibilities arranged themselves neatly in my mind. 1. She was out with Cole specifically on what was functionally a date after telling me she was going to sleep. 2. She was out with a group of people that included Cole, and for reasons she deemed easier, she had told me she was going to sleep rather than explain a social situation involving him. 3. Something else entirely that I wasn't seeing. The problem with option 3 is that I had no evidence for it. The problem with options 1 and 2 is that they were both, in fundamentally different degrees, a betrayal. Option 2 is the I can explain version. The version that, in movies, usually results in the misunderstanding being cleared up and everyone crying and hugging by the third act. But here's what they don't tell you about the I can explain version. Even if the explanation clears the specific night in question, it doesn't clear the months of building tension. It doesn't clear the shortened phone calls. It doesn't clear the phone screen adjustments. It doesn't clear the lunch that had an arm in the frame. It doesn't clear the specific choice she made to text me, "I'm going offline, love you," while she was sitting in a restaurant with cocktails and a lit candle. That choice, that specific, deliberate, unnecessary lie, existed regardless of what version of events was true. Oliver came by my desk at around 3 p.m. He sat down in the chair beside me without being invited and just looked at me for a second. Oliver is one of those people who has known me long enough to skip about 4 steps of conversational preamble. We'd been friends since university. He knew the relationship well. He'd met her, liked her, attended the birthday dinner where I had given her the necklace that she was probably wearing right now, somewhere I couldn't see. "She's really upset," he said. "That doesn't tell me anything new," I said. "She says it's not what it looks like." People who are actually innocent lead with the explanation, not the disclaimer. He was quiet for a second. "She says she'll explain everything if you just give her 5 minutes. I'm not ready to give her 5 minutes. Fair, he said. But are you sure you want to make a permanent decision in the middle of a temporary emotional state? And I thought about that for a long time after he went back to his desk. Because here's the thing about the advice: don't make permanent decisions in temporary emotional states. It's correct in a general sense. It's useful in most situations. But there's a version of that advice that becomes a mechanism for keeping people in situations that are fundamentally broken. Because if you apply that logic infinitely, if you always wait until you're calm, always wait until you have all the information, always wait until the other person has had a chance to present their side, you can spend your entire life in a holding pattern, never acting on what you actually feel, never trusting your own perception long enough to move. My emotional state that day wasn't temporary because I had been briefly shocked. My emotional state that day was the result of 18 months of being slowly, quietly unsettled. And the Instagram story hadn't created the feeling. It had simply cracked open the container it had been stored in. That evening, I unblocked her email. Not her phone, not any social media, just the email. Because I wanted to read what she had to say, but I wanted it in a format that gave me time to think before responding. No typing indicators. No red receipts. No pressure to react in real time. I opened her email. It was long. I'll paraphrase rather than walk through every line. She said she was sorry for not telling me the truth. She said she had been out that night with a group, herself, Cole, and 2 other people from the same creative circle. She said it had been an impromptu plan, a last-minute, let's grab dinner, that came together around 10 p.m. She said she hadn't told me because she knew I had complicated feelings about Cole, her words, and she didn't want to deal with the conversation that would follow. She said she should have been honest, and she wasn't, and she knew that was wrong. She said nothing had happened between her and Cole. She said she needed me to believe her. She said she loved me. She said she would answer any question I had if I would just talk to her. I read the email 3 times. The first time, I was looking for the lie. The second time, I was trying to decide if the explanation was actually plausible. The third time, I was listening for what wasn't there. And here's what wasn't there. An explanation for why she had specifically sent me a love you text 15 minutes before the story posted. That detail, that one specific detail, was absent from her accounting of events. Because if she had texted me to say goodnight and then just happened to end up at a dinner with Cole, she would have explained that sequence. She would have said, the plan came together after I texted you, and I should have told you. But she didn't. She said the plan came together at 10 p.m. And she texted me at 11:02 p.m., 1 hour after the plan had already formed. She had sat with the knowledge of where she was going for an hour, and then texted me a going offline message that was designed to close the door on any further contact for the night. That was not an accidental omission. That was architecture. I wrote back. One question. Just one. You said the plan came together around 10 p.m. You texted me at 11:02 p.m. saying you were going offline for the night. What? I hit send. I closed my laptop. I made dinner. I did the dishes. I watched half of something on TV without retaining a single frame of it. I went back to my laptop at about 10 p.m. that night. Her response was waiting. I didn't want to fight. 5 words. She had sat down, read my question, and distilled her entire explanation into 5 words. I didn't want to fight. And there it was. Not, I was scared you'd misunderstand. Not, I knew you'd be insecure about it. Not even, I should have told you, and I panicked. I didn't want to fight. Which, when you translate it out of the careful language of self-protection, means, I knew what I was doing would upset you, and instead of making a different decision, I chose to deceive you so I wouldn't have to deal with your reaction. That is not a person who made a one-time mistake. That is a person who, when faced with a choice between transparency and convenience, chose convenience. Repeatedly, over months. I thought about all the times I had chosen to not bring something up because I didn't want to fight either. The Cole mentions that I had let slide. The phone screen thing that I had never addressed. The lunch with the arm and frame that I had scrolled past without comment. We had both, in our own ways, been managing this thing in the dark. She had been managing it by being less than honest. I had been managing it by refusing to look directly at it. And the result was a relationship that looked intact from the outside, but had been eroding from the inside for God knows how long. I wrote back the next morning, because I needed to sleep on it first. And when I woke up, the clarity I felt was not the angry kind. It was the other kind. The quiet kind. The kind that doesn't need to yell because it has already made up its mind. This is what I sent. I understand that you didn't want to fight. I've been not wanting to fight for months too. But somewhere along the way, not wanting to fight became something we were both using as a reason to not be honest. I don't think one conversation is going to fix that. I don't think you did this maliciously, and I don't think you're a bad person. But I also don't think I can be with someone who, in the moment of choosing between honesty and comfort, consistently chooses comfort. I wish things were different. I sent it. I went for a run. She replied while I was still out. A long email. Much longer than the first. She said I wasn't being fair. She said everyone avoids difficult conversations sometimes. She said the situation with Cole was genuinely innocent. She said I was punishing her for a mistake that deserved a conversation, not an ending. She said she had never done anything physically. She said she was asking for one chance to talk, in person, face to face. I sat on a bench outside and read the whole thing. And I noticed something. Not one word in that email addressed the pattern. She had explained the specific night. She had defended the specific relationship with Cole. She had argued for her own fundamental innocence in terms of physical actions. But she had said nothing, not a sentence, not a clause, about the months of small evasions. The shortened calls, the careful screen angles, the lunch she hadn't mentioned, the hour she'd sat knowing where she was going before texting me goodnight. Because those things couldn't be defended. They could only be acknowledged. And she wasn't ready to acknowledge them. I wrote back one more time. The last thing I sent her. I believe you that nothing physical happened. I'm not ending things because of what I think you did with Cole. I'm ending things because of what you did with me. There's a difference. Take care of yourself. That was it. I sent it. I reblocked the email. I didn't open it again. I want to fast forward about 2 weeks. Because the story doesn't fully land without what happened next. Oliver came over on a Saturday, the way he sometimes did, and we ordered pizza and watched something and talked. At some point, he told me that he had spoken to her. Not on my behalf. Just a mutual friend checking in on both sides of a rupture, the way good mutual friends sometimes do. I asked what she'd said. He said she was genuinely sad. He said she genuinely maintained that nothing had happened. He said, and this is the part I've thought about the most, that she told him she had been pulling away slightly because she was scared. Not of me, not of Cole specifically, but of the relationship itself, of how serious it was getting, of the moving in together conversations, of the fact that things were heading somewhere permanent, and she had started to panic quietly, in the way that people do when they love someone but are terrified of what loving someone fully actually requires of you. He said she hadn't handled that fear honestly. He said she'd handled it by creating a little bit of distance, keeping a life slightly off to the side, maintaining a connection that felt a little more casual and low stakes. Not a replacement, a pressure valve. And look, I've turned that over in my mind more times than I can count, because there is a version of that explanation that is genuinely human. That kind of fear, the fear of full commitment, of losing yourself inside something permanent, is real. I felt it. A lot of people have felt it. And if she had come to me with that fear, even clumsily, even badly, we could have talked about it. We could have slowed down. We could have adjusted. We could have, together, figured out what she needed in order to feel less suffocated by the weight of where things were heading. But she hadn't come to me. She had gone sideways. She had managed her fear quietly and privately, and at my expense. And when caught, she hadn't led with that truth either. That truth had only emerged through a third party, weeks later, after I had already walked. There's a version of me that wishes I had known. That wishes, somewhere in month 14 or 15, she had sat across from me and said, I'm scared. I'm pulling slightly. I need you to understand that I love you, but I'm terrified of how real this is getting. That version of me would have listened. That version of me would have put down whatever I was holding and looked at her and said, okay, tell me what you need. I believe that. I genuinely believe that conversation could have changed everything. But it never happened. And you can't rewrite a relationship around a conversation that was never had. It has been about 4 months since all of this. I haven't spoken to her. I won't say I haven't thought about her, because that would be a lie, and this whole thing has been about what happens when you stack small lies until the structure collapses. I've thought about her, more than I would like to admit. There are moments, a particular kind of Sunday afternoon, a restaurant that plays music like the kind she liked, the smell of a specific coffee brand that she always had in her kitchen, where something hits me and I feel it. That grief that isn't quite grief because the person isn't gone, they're just gone from your life, and somehow that's harder. But here's what I know. I know that the relationship, whatever its good parts were, had been running on two people separately choosing not to see what was happening. Her by lying about small things. Me by refusing to confront them. And a relationship where both people are looking away from the same thing is not a strong relationship. It's a shared delusion. And shared delusions eventually end. The only variable is what triggers the ending. For us, it was an Instagram story and a screenshot and 45 seconds of blocking. People have asked me, in the weeks since, whether I regret blocking her the way I did. Before she could explain. Before she even had a chance to respond to the screenshot. And here's my honest answer. I don't regret the blocking. I regret the speed. Not because the outcome would have been different, but because the way I did it, silent, surgical, no words, denied both of us the chance to say what needed to be said in real time. She deserved to be spoken to. Not because her actions had earned warmth, but because 2 years together, however flawed, deserves words. It deserves more than a screenshot and a vanishing act. And if I'm being honest about my own behavior the way I've been honest about hers, then that's the part one carry. Not the ending. The wordlessness of it. There's also something I've had to reckon with about what I was actually doing in those 45 seconds. Because I told myself I was protecting myself. And I was. But I was also punishing her. I was making sure she had to sit with uncertainty. With the read receipt on the screenshot, the 3-dot typing indicator that went nowhere, and then the sudden wall of every platform going dark at once. I was making her feel what I had felt on all those nights when the phone call ended early and something was slightly off, and I had chosen to say nothing. I was making her feel it all at once instead of slowly, the way I had. Was that fair? I don't know. I genuinely don't know. What I do know is this. The relationship taught me something that I think is actually important. About the cost of not saying the difficult thing when you first feel it. About how much damage accumulates in the space between what you notice and what you say. I had let things build, small observation after small observation, small discomfort after small discomfort, until they had formed something so large and compressed that when it finally broke, it broke everything. Not just the thing I was upset about that night. Everything. 2 years. The weekend trip. The Sunday cooking, the moving in conversations, the necklace, all of it, caught in the blast radius of a thing I could have addressed at month 8 if I had trusted myself enough to say, "Hey, this thing with Cole, I need you to actually talk to me about it. Not reassure me. Talk to me." I've started doing that now. In general, I mean, not in a relationship. I'm not there yet, and I'm not pretending to be. But in life, when something bothers me, I try to say it at the actual moment it bothers me, instead of filing it away. It's uncomfortable every single time. It still feels like pulling on a thread I'm not sure I want unraveled. But I've learned that the threads pull themselves eventually. The only question is whether you're the one holding the end of it, or whether you're the one surprised by the unraveling. I looked at her Instagram once, about a month after everything, through a secondary account, the way you do when you know you're going to regret it, but do it anyway. She had posted a normal amount. Life going on stuff. Coffee cups and design work and a sunset photo from somewhere. Nothing that told me anything I was actually looking for. I don't know if she and Cole are a thing now. I don't know if they were ever actually a thing. I don't know if the explanation she gave Oliver was the full truth or a softer version of it. I've made peace with not knowing, which is the thing no one tells you about the aftermath of a relationship that ends in ambiguity. You don't get the ending where all the information comes out and everything resolves cleanly into a shape you understand. You just get the pieces you have, and you carry them until they get lighter. If you're reading this and you're in the part of the story I was in at month 8, where something feels slightly off but nothing has been said, and you keep choosing the charitable interpretation, I want to say something to you. Not advice. I'm not qualified to give advice. Just something to think about. The thing you are not saying has weight, and the longer you carry it unsaid, the heavier it gets. And eventually it stops being something you're carrying. It becomes part of the floor you're standing on. And then one day the floor gives way, and you look down at the pieces, and you realize the floor was made of all the things you didn't say. Say the thing. Not aggressively. Not as an accusation. Just say it. Ask the question that's sitting in the back of your mind at 11 p.m. when something feels slightly wrong and you're not sure why. Because the worst outcome of asking is an uncomfortable conversation. And the worst outcome of not asking is something like this. The last thing I'll say is about that screenshot. The one I sent her before I blocked everything. Just the image, no caption, no words. I've thought about why I did it that way. Why I didn't write, "What is this?" or "I thought you were offline," or anything that would have opened a conversation. And I think the truth is that by the time I sent it, I wasn't looking for an explanation. I was closing a loop. I was saying, "I see this. I see you. I am not the person who looked away this time." It wasn't for her. It was for me. It was the first honest thing I had done in months. And maybe that's where this actually ends. Not with the blocking, not with the emails, not even with the conversation I had with Oliver. It ends with that screenshot. Sent at 11:23 p.m. on a night when I was supposed to be asleep. Sent to a woman who was sitting in a restaurant with cocktail glasses and a lit candle and someone's arm in the frame. Sent with no words because for the first time in a long time, the truth didn't need any. Edit 1. I know some of you are going to ask if I regret not hearing her out in person. Genuinely. I've asked myself that question 100 times. My honest answer is that I don't think the in-person conversation would have changed the outcome. It might have changed the process. But the outcome? I think we were already past the point where talking would have led somewhere different. Some endings aren't prevented by more communication. They're just delayed by it. Edit 2. To everyone saying, "You should have given her a chance to explain," I hear you. I really do. And maybe in a different version of this story, I would have. But I also need you to understand that the explanation she gave me, when she finally gave it, didn't make me feel better. It made me feel like I had been right to feel uneasy for months and had been dismissing myself the whole time. That's not something more time would have fixed.